So this here is the version 1.03 demo for Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin on PlayStation 5. No doubt at this point you've seen the trailer, or at least some memes based on it.
Here to kill chaos, 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 chaos.
Yeah, to say the least, the trailer wasn't the best. That said, I've been willing to go into this with an open mind, and what we got here isn't exactly a best or worst case scenario. At this point, with this current build, it's okay at best. Promising, but needs some work. And of course, that much should go without say. This game is far from complete and will likely change a lot from what we've seen in this demo, so take all of this with a grain of salt. Take also the visual quality of this video with a grain of salt. The game itself doesn't look the best yet, but it will look even worse in this video. Compression from YouTube aside, I'm currently working off a really dated graphics card, which does not support very good video encoding. This has been a thorn in my side for a bit, and is even more noticeable now trying to record footage for the PlayStation 5. But given the state of the market at the moment, updating my graphics card just isn't really that possible. But if you'd like to help make it possible, let me tell you something. All the dialogue in this video has been recorded with the Fifine K678 microphone. You may have seen their sponsored piece in my last video. Suffice to say, if you like the sound and need a mic on the cheap, check out the affiliate link in the description. Every little bit helps. And of course, thank you Fifine for the microphone. With that said, let's make the best of this and get into it. I'm Tarks Gauntlet, your host for all things niche and JRPG related. If you like what you see here, leave a like, leave a comment, and subscribe to make sure you don't miss another episode. First off, if you've seen the trailer, then you have as much story as the demo is willing to divulge.
We're here to kill chaos.
You play as Jack, the main member in a trio heading into the castle to kill Chaos. To expound upon this any further, we'd actually have to get into some talk about Final Fantasy 1, but I do wonder how much good that would do. This doesn't exactly appear to be a remake of Final Fantasy 1, nor a prequel or a sequel. It's kind of like an alternative take on it, similar to how Final Fantasy 7 Remake worked. It remains to be seen, of course, how far they're gonna go with this idea. As a game, it functions very unlike other Final Fantasies, and is much more in line with a Dark Souls style title or Team Ninja's previous works on Neo 1 and 2. The demo will take us from the entrance of this castle through to its boss, Chaos, with a question mark at the end. It should only take about an hour to beat if you can pull it off without dying, but if you're like me, you may find yourself spending 2 hours getting through a single run, for reasons I'll get into in a bit. So the combat is real-time and action-based, and so far they've already packed a lot into it. The movement and camera controls are all very standard for the genre. Light attacks are done with R1, and your special attacks are done with R2, though these will drain your soul gauge, which you can see down here beneath your HP meter. So, this meter here is actually just mana, but for some reason in my entire script I kept calling it a soul gauge, so soul gauge it is, because this game's got lots of soul. Let's go with that. You dodge attacks with X and block with either L1 or circle. Your L1 block is your normal blocking ability, which throws up your sword or shield and keeps it up until you let go of the button. With good timing, you can parry off of this as well. Your circle block is known as a soul shield. Like a standard block, it can be parried from, and the parry window on it is pretty forgiving. Pulling off a soul shield block as well will also charge your soul gauge, and add more to the maximum amount of soul that you can hold. Upon dying, your soul gauge diminishes, so it's good to use the soul shield as often as possible and keep the meter as large as you can. However, you'll want to use it in small bursts. The toss up for the soul shield is that holding it up will drain your break gauge. If you use the soul shield on an attack that's color-coded in purple, you can absorb that attack and launch it back at the enemy a set number of times. Further, some attacks cannot be blocked at all. Blocking in either fashion, though, will add to your break gauge. When your break gauge is completely depleted, you will be temporarily downed and left vulnerable. So it becomes a big part of the combat to choose when to block and when to start dodging to allow your break gauge to recover. Similarly, it's a big part of combat to drain the enemy's break gauge and down them so that you might get a soul burst on them, what's essentially a QTE cinematic attack which grants you more soul. On the earlier note of death penalties, dying will also bring you back to the last cube you rested at, basically this game's answer to bonfires. These cubes will also fill your HP and soul gauge and restore your curatives, of which you get 5 that you can use by pushing down on the D-pad. With L2, we can bring up a sub-menu where special abilities can be equipped. At the start, we have only Lightbringer, which is like a powered up state that boosts your your damage output until the red gauge is completely drained. You will unlock more abilities, however, on the job trees menu. And speaking of jobs, you can occupy 2 at all times, but you can only use 1 of them at a time. Each job levels up separately and will net its own job points, which you use on that job's job tree. While in combat, at the simple press of the triangle button, you can swap to whatever job you have in your secondary job slot. For me, I mostly kept a magic class in here. Magic can be absolutely indispensable in certain fights, and I really like what they're doing with it. However, in this build, I don't like how it's controlled. It's really cool that you can cast water on Chaos to douse his flaming sword, then switch right back to your warrior class to keep pummeling it. But if you need to change what spell you're using, it's just a cumbersome task. At first, you hold R2 to bring up the spell wheel. You surrender control of your character and use the left stick to select the spell you need. You have to be careful though not to take too long, or you'll charge a level 2 version of that spell. As soon as you release R2, you will be casting the spell you selected. But what if your target got away and maybe you don't want to cast that spell now? In this case, you have to awkwardly maneuver to hitting the L1 button and cancel out of this menu. It just doesn't really feel that good. Dealing with this menu in active combat is just a pain, but then controls are one of the biggest issues this game has right now. And this is what ultimately kept getting me killed in my run and made my playthrough on normal take over 2 hours. I spent a hell of a long time wrestling with the controls. They're simply too busy and they don't feel all that intuitive. Certain decisions just have me scratching my head too, like holding in the touchpad to climb a ladder. Why? Any other button or just pushing the stick into the ladder will do. To see if I could get the hang of the controls better, I actually ran through this demo a second time. The second time on hard mode, and while I definitely adjusted more, it still doesn't feel that clean. That said, since I played on both difficulties, I can say hard mode is halfway to being what it should be. Some good decisions and some poor ones. Enemies are obviously scaled up, but for the most part they just feel too spongy. Fighting them feels rather the same, it just takes longer. This is mostly true for Chaos too, who just wasn't that fun on hard. It's discouraging and boring to see a great sword basically doing chip damage, making the boss take longer than he's fun for. But I did notice a couple changes on hard that I rather liked. Dark vents, these sort of nest things that spawn enemies, have a greater chance of spawning special tough enemies. And some moves that Chaos normally had reserved for phase 2, he would now use from the start of phase 1 and with more regularity. Had I played on hard the first time around, this would have made it a lot more challenging to get through. However, having beaten it on normal already, I knew how to handle most of the attacks, so the battle simply just took longer. Now you probably noticed already that our characters don't look quite like the Hot Topic shoppers we've seen in the trailer. Well, thankfully Stranger of Paradise supports a fleshed out armor and weapon equip system, and these equips are reflected on our in-game models. Loot drops feel more akin to a Borderlands, Darksiders 2, or Diablo set of affairs than they do a Souls game. So they might not feel that special or unique, but they do keep you going back to your equip menu to change things up and keep you gradually upping your stats. Every class uses different gear, and though it could be a pain to keep checking them all, you can auto-equip the best sets with L3, and you don't have to manually look at each piece after you get it. When you pick them up, you will see a little up or down arrow indicating whether or not it's an improvement over what you're already wearing, which I think is a great feature. One of the bigger issues I had with this game lied in some of the visuals though. I can handle a game looking budget in some areas, that's fine, but quite frankly, this game is often way too dark. Now you might think that's the point, what with dialogue like this.
Darkness is so thick I can taste it.
But if I can't see my character dressed in black on a red carpet in a well-lit room, there's a problem. And this is everywhere throughout the first dungeon. You often can't see shit. Enemies will also blend into the scenery, which in some places is a gimmick of the fight, but in most places it's just due to poor optics. Playing this at times felt like watching the movie Alien vs. Predator Requiem. Darkness is a good way to establish an atmosphere, but when you constantly can't see what's going on, it's little more than just frustrating. The only other issues I had with this were pretty minimal. There were a couple fights that just felt slapdash together, just a large amount of enemies that don't create a fun and interesting encounter, and instead just create a chaotic, messy one. There was also some performance issues with dropped frames and the likes, but I'm willing to chalk that up to this game just not being complete. At this point, there's a good foundation, and I think things are promising. Some of these issues will likely fix themselves as the game gets built out more, but I really hope they do something about the darkness in these areas and the ease of the controls, especially for spellcasting. And And nobody tell me to just turn the brightness up, alright? I tried that. It just makes the darkness look more washed out. It doesn't fix it. But yeah, that's where we are right now. It's a cheesy game with bad dialogue and hilarious machismo, but some solid and challenging combat with great ideas behind it. It's just a bit held back by cumbersome controls, dark environments, and some lackluster stage and encounter planning. But all in, a great start that they can definitely improve on further. Upon beating the game, I filled out the survey and I fully suspect they'll listen loud and clear to fan feedback, and hopefully this video lends another voice to said feedback. But anyway, that's my thoughts on Stranger of Paradise so far. Awful trailer, somewhat promising game. And if you guys like the video, you know the deal. Like, comment, subscribe, share the video if you can. Links to all of my socials are in the description below, and as always folks, thanks for watching. Also, while we're here on the end screen, one last time, thank you Fifine for the microphone used in this video. If you guys like the sound and want a mic on the cheap like $59.99 USD, I have an affiliate link in the description below. By all means, please check it out, every little bit helps.